Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I know. I am excited to have you. So I would love for you to just introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. Well, my name is Marjorie Vail. Currently, I am a trauma therapist / coach. Before that, I was an educator, actually. I was a literacy coach and a teacher. And I recently transitioned because, during the pandemic, you're just kind of like, what am I doing with my life? So I became a trauma therapist, specifically wanting to focus with women who've had perinatal loss as something that I've experienced myself. I'm a pageant girl. I love to compete in pageants. I've won 2 titles. I was Mrs. New York International 2015, and I was Mrs. New York American 2020. And both times, stillbirth awareness was my platform. So I'm very entrenched in that community. And lastly, I am co-director of awareness for Push for Empowered Pregnancy, which is an organization that is determined to end preventable stillbirth by 2030. We want to reduce it by 30%, by 2050, by 50%. So that is who I am.
Love it. But you have a story, as you mentioned. So I would love for you to take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your lost story.
Sure. I got married pretty young in New York City standards. I was 25 years old. And, I come from a culture who, we don't wait to have children. You pretty much get pregnant on the honeymoon. But my husband and I wanted to travel and really get to know each other. But at the age of 27, I believe I was 27, I found out we were pregnant. I was really, really excited. Had an uneventful pregnancy, which was, amazing. And I think halfway through, I had 4 other girlfriends who were pregnant at the same time. One of them, my best friend. And they were telling me about we were talking about giving birth in a hospital versus a birthing center, having a midwife versus a doctor. And so midway, I think about 6 months, my husband and I decided, let's go with a midwife instead of a doctor. So we were pretty excited about that. We found a woman who was very popular, and she was one of the very first midwives in New York City. She was a woman of color. And I was really, really excited to just embark on this journey because it's new, it's your first time, and it's very exciting. So fast forward to September 27th, 2004. My water broke on the bus on the way to work. And thank goodness we had a contingency plan in my job. We didn't really need it. And I called my midwife, and all of a sudden, she was doubting me. So I said, because I told her, I said, my water broke. And she said, are you sure your water broke? And I'm like, okay, I know I've never been pregnant before, but I can tell I've never experienced what I just experienced. She was going into a whole bunch of reasons why, I need to be sure. So we already were starting off on a bad vibe. But she asked me to come in. So I went in, and she was like, yeah, your water did break, but you're not in active labor. So I need you to go home and labor. So I said, okay. So went home, labored for several hours. And then I came back around 7 p.m. at St. Luke's Roosevelt in Manhattan. They had a birthing center within the hospital. So while I was in there, she was MIA. She was not present. She was not presence of mind and presence of physical body. And I was basically she have me do something and just leave the room. So let's say she put me on the ball. I'm on the ball. I'm laboring on the ball, but she's not in the room helping me labor on the ball. She left me with my husband, my cousin, who are clueless, and just was not there. So the pain was getting so difficult. I'm telling my husband, go get her, please, find out why she's not in here. And I told her, I can't this is too hard. I want some drugs. She gave me some kind of narcotic that put me to sleep between contractions, and just didn't really do anything. So I told my husband, go get her. So he went to go get her, and she was a little apologetic, and then she came in and realized that I was like 9 centimeters. It was time for me to push. So it was just kind of like, she put me in a hot tub. It was too hot. I was just like, I was miserable. And I told her, I said, I want drugs. I want drugs. Give me drugs. I want to go upstairs. No, you're fine. You're 9 centimeters. So she got a mirror, and, my cousin, my husband are to right or left of me, and I see his head. He's crowning. We hear both heartbeats. So she's like, push, push. I'm pushing. And then by the second push, she went to put the Doppler again, and we just heard one heartbeat. And so she was like, so it became an emergency. So we went from pushing and laboring to her calling the doctor's coming down, but it took her a while to come down. So she puts me on a gurney to go up. So the doctor is downstairs, I'm upstairs. It just became like a nightmare. Like, she had me on the gurney on all fours. I felt my body still pushing because it became natural at that point. And so they put me in the OR. They started cutting me before I was asleep. I felt it. I was telling the anesthesiologist, I felt it, and he's yelling at them, wait for me to put her under, and I honestly thought I wasn't going to make it out. And I don't know if it was because of the drugs, but I was really calm about it. And the last person that I saw to my left was my husband. And I was like, well, I literally told God, take my spirit, because I didn't think I was going to make it. And when I woke up, the doctor was at the foot of my bed, and she said, didn't give me a chance to kind of get my bearing, and just said he didn't make it. And I was like, okay. And I when I looked to my left, my husband's crying, the nurse is crying. To the right, my cousin's crying. And I was just like, wow. Like, I just was like, I don't even know. Honestly, I was so drugged up. I was just kind of like, okay. Didn't even know what to do or say. But I did ask to see him, and which they obliged me to do that. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Wow. So what did they do after you were able to see him? Did they give you all options on what you all could do to bury him, or what happened next?
So bear in mind, it was 18 years ago. Like, now they have cuddle cots, and all of that. So we literally had like 5 minutes with him, like 5 or 10 minutes. We had asked them to hold on to him for a little longer because my mother-in-law was coming, and we wanted her to be able to see him before they took him away. So they didn't have, when I woke up, he wasn't in the room. I asked for him to be brought in, and I just kind of held him for a little bit, and like took off his blanket. I just felt like I needed to see his whole body, opened his eyes, and just kind of like, it was just like, wow, like he looked alive. Because sometimes most babies die in utero. So when they come out, they're a little like darker and bruised and everything, but he literally almost made it. My doctor said that my aunt, who's a nurse, told me had they got him out quick enough, he just would have needed a tablespoon of blood to survive, but because my midwife didn't listen to me, and I wasn't on an epidural, it just took longer to get to him, and so he didn't make it. Yeah.
Wow. So then how did you all process it as you went home? Because as you mentioned before, there wasn't a lot of tools and the resources a lot of hospitals have now. Even back then, it's still a gap in our systems on how we care for mothers and their families when they lose babies. So how did they approach you all with what was the next steps for you all on y'all's journey?
Nothing.
They didn't do anything.
No, they honestly didn't know. They honestly didn't know what to do with us. I think one of the best decisions that the doctor made was not to put me on the labor and delivery, like the maternity floor. She put me on the surgical floor, which was very, very smart of her. So then they sent a social worker who's just like really, and I think the only thing that helped us relate was she was of the same culture as I was. She was Haitian, and she was just kind of like, I don't even have like a support group. Like I have support group of people who've like had family members that passed, but nothing for like babies, you know? So she just like, she had nothing to really offer. My poor husband slept on the floor for 5 days while I was in the hospital, like nothing, like no support. They had me on morphine for like 3 days. So I wasn't even really able to connect emotionally. I wasn't even there. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law was like, I'm really worried about you. He was like, you're not crying, you're not doing anything. And it was just like, it wasn't my fault, because I was just kind of like, you know, I don't know, I'm drugged. So I think by the 3rd day, I told him, I said, that's enough. I don't want any more. I'm okay. I'll be okay. And I was just kind of looking out the window thinking to myself, wow, like, how am I going to get past this? Like, how is this, how am I going to get through this? I had nothing. So, no, so short answer, they had nothing. No support for me.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So back then too, you know, a lot of folks go through and have support groups and family and friends and therapy to help them navigate through. How did you all navigate through or get to the place where you're ready to try again? And have your have your another child. How did you all get to that place?
That's a good question. And I think the hardest piece of it all is I come from a culture who does not talk about the dead, does not want to talk about the dead, think it's just taboo. I didn't even go to our son's funeral because it is against my culture to go to as a young mother, to go to my son's funeral, because they believe that the dead calls upon those that are not yet born. And so I was told not to go, which I was fine with, because I had a C-section and physically I didn't feel like I physically could go there. So I didn't. So I had the cultural aspect of it. And then I had the part where I was just kind of like, okay, well, I feel like I'm just on my own here. So I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I fell into a depression. I did. I don't know how long the depression was, but I remember thinking to myself, this is too much and this is too hard. I have to do something. It was kind of like a prayer, even though I was mad at God. I basically lost my faith after that. And so I was watching the news and I saw this news segment on New York One about volunteering. I was like, I need to do something with myself. Maybe I need to volunteer. So that's what I started to do. And I didn't realize for me, that was the therapy that I needed to be able to like support other people. And some of it were baby related, like mothers who just had babies and, you know, doing inventory for like diapers and things like that. And it didn't bother me. I think I was just kind of outer focus instead of inner focus. So that was my therapy. Besides talking to my husband and traveling really helped. We traveled a lot a couple of years. For the next 2 years, my husband and I traveled, and that was very therapeutic as well. Very, very helpful, and just to kind of see the world and other cultures and And be sad too, because I was in Paris. I was sad, but I was in Paris, so it was really nice. But I remember what got me to the point where I realized I could have another, or why don't I have another? I remember my girlfriend was, so all my girlfriends, like I said, I had 4 girlfriends who were pregnant at the same time. Everyone had their babies. As a matter of fact, my best friend, I remember telling myself she's going to want me to be at her birth, which she did. So I had to mentally prepare myself to go there, which I did. And then it was afterwards that I said, one of the other pieces of getting myself, my other therapy was I basically cut myself off from everybody. And not just like, I wrote to everyone, because you had to write back then, that I needed space. So that was therapeutic for me, not to be like in spaces where it's just babies, you know, because it was just too hard. So I remember my husband, I said, okay, at first I was so distraught. I asked the doctor, like, how long before I can have another? She said, well, I wouldn't let you do it for 6 months. So I remember, okay, 6 months, I'm going to have another. Like, I just felt like the need to redeem myself. And if that makes sense, like, you know, like I failed as a woman or something, and I needed to redeem myself. And then as the 6 months was approaching, I'm like, I'm ready. So my husband said, we like, okay, let's wait a year. Okay, so, okay. Then I went to a girlfriend's shower, and I just felt so depressed. I was just like there, and I was like, and my husband's like, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. He was like, you know, we don't have to stand on the fact that we said we're going to wait a year or 2 years. You can have a baby now if you want. So it had been like, I think a year by that point. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. I do have that choice. But it was important to me that I didn't do it to try and replace the baby that passed. And I think that was what's important to me. And I think once I passed that stage, I felt that I was ready to have another, which we did, thank God. Yeah.
Yes. So tell us about that experience. How was that, having a pregnancy after loss?
Oh, well, I felt blessed enough that I found out, excuse me, I was pregnant in November, and I started grad school in January. So I was a little too busy with writing papers and going to classes to really think about it too much. But I was a bit anxious when I had moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is really happening. Because for me, we lost him at the very end. It was like, literally, he was almost there. So it wasn't like I can say, oh, I passed 3 months. Oh, I passed 6 months. Oh, I passed 8 months. Literally for me, it would be like, he's crying. Okay, he made it, you know, kind of thing. So it was a little bit of anxiety, but it was distracted so much by school that I didn't have time to really think about it. But one thing though is I did have a discussion with my obstetrician, and going back and forth about when we should deliver him, which if we should do it at 38 weeks, because our firstborn died at 37 weeks. And she was like, no, I want to do 39. I said, no, I want to do 37. So we're going back and forth. So we decided on 38 weeks. But as babies do, he came on his own time. And literally right after I was done with summer classes, the following week, he was just kind of like, I'm coming. So, which was perfect for me because I had a scheduled C-section, and I think I would have worked my way up into an anxious state. They probably had, I mean, my cousin had to be knocked out. That's how anxious she was. And I felt like that would have been me. So the fact that like I started having contractions and I called my doctor, she said, come in, and she's like, oh, we're taking him out. I'm like, what's happening? What was perfect for me because I didn't have to like think about it. So yeah.
No, that is so true. I think that we all go through that process, especially for those of us who've had losses later and like almost at term,
Mhm.
it's like, Lord, when do we have this child? Is the child going to come early? Are we going to go through the same experience?
Yeah.
All those emotions come back towards the end. And I'm sure it does for those who've had losses throughout the pregnancy as well, whether it's in the first or second trimester, no different than the third.
Yeah.
So for your rainbow baby, do
Mhm.
you feel as if you have parented this rainbow baby differently because of you experienced the loss? Or are you a helicopter mom? Are you more angst about exactly where your son, your living son, is doing and being, even though he's older now? I'm sure there was a point
Okay.
in time that you were like very much so on him. Did you have that experience?
So I felt like in the beginning it was very hard to connect with him. Um, I had a shock too after he was born. They kept him, he'd swallow some water. So that was like, oh gosh, we're not starting on the right foot. And then yeah, it was hard to connect with him. But then we connected. So I did have to parent him different because it turns out when he was 4, 5, he was diagnosed with autism. So my parenting had to be different regardless, because there were so many things that he needed, and so much support. And I have to say, I was clueless. I mean, you're clueless as a parent. You go by what you learn, what you read, or whatever. But when you're a parent of a child that is disabled or learning disabled, or it's like extra, and people don't seem to understand that, but it's different, because it's like different in a sense where you're thinking of more things, right? It's not like your regular parent things that you got to think about. So like for my son, him having autism, if we're going someplace, I have to tell him where we're going. I have to tell him how long we're going to be there for. I got to tell him who's going to be there. What is the environment going to be like? Because it's not like he's a kid who could just be like, okay, let's go, So it was just kind of like different. I have to say I was hard on myself as a parent, because I just kind of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm sure all parents feel like that, but I just really felt like I'm not doing it. I'm not doing a great job. So it was really tough for myself. It took me a while to be like, you know what? Listen, you're doing the best that you can with what you know, what you have, with what you're learning. It's okay. And for a while I had to be, I felt like, as someone who's a therapist, one of the things that I learned for myself about myself is that I felt like he was trying to bridge a gap between his older brother and himself. Like I didn't realize that a part of me was kind of doing that to him, like trying to fill that gap, and what a heavy burden for that poor kid. And when I realized that, it just like broke my heart. And I was just like, no, he is who he is. Like, that's one, this is the other. That's it, that was very humbling for me. That was very, very humbling for me, as a parent, because you're like, you want to be great. You want to be the best mom ever, and you're just like, okay, you putting too much pressure on this kid. Like, stop, So we've learned a lot together, and we're continuing to learn. Just so grateful that he is the genius that he is, in my heart. He really he is really a sunshine to us. But he was a tough kid. He was a tough kid. And which is why I felt like I had him filling the gap, because it made, and I'm sorry, I'm very blunt and honest about where I was or where I am as a parent, because I feel like people worry that they have these thoughts and they can't share it. But it's in sharing that you feel like, okay, I'm free. sometimes with his behavior and all the things that was happening, it made me wonder, well, I wonder if the first one would have been easier. You know what I mean? It was easy, would have been an easier kid. Oh my gosh, like, oh, this kid is so tough. Like, oh my gosh. So this is where I felt like I was forcing him to kind of like, be this thing that he's not. And once I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, Margie, just like get it together, just relax. So, we stumbled and we crawled and we cried through our, I would say 10 years. He's a big teenager now, and our relationship is better. Actually really good. Let me stop. It's really good. We have a really good relationship, but we still have the moments where he has his meltdowns, and I'm trying to navigate and figure out like, what is it that he needs? What is it that he wants? So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, and I can empathize with you on that, on having a child with a disability and special needs, and how complex it is. I think people think on the other side of it, of motherhood or parenthood, that, having a neurotypical child is already has its nuances. I don't know if people understand the level of angst and anxiety and difficulty and the challenges that having a child that's learning disabled, that has a physical disability, that brings to all of the other nuances that it is to be a motherhood and a parent. And I really love what you talked about, how you connected and had to disconnect, I guess these expectations or things that you have for the child that you lost, and kind of putting that on your rainbow baby. And I think a lot of us do that. We don't, as you mentioned, we don't voice it. We don't say that that's what we're doing. And it's probably how we mother and how we parent, by being kind of very hands-on in our approach, what I would consider helicopter, like making sure we're hovering over our children to make sure, not only that they don't do things wrong or don't get into situations where they may end up passing away, because obviously that's a fear for moms and parents who've had kids who've experienced losses, but also it's more or less making sure that the kids, that we aren't trying to replace our kids with our rainbow babies, with the children that we previously lost. So I'm happy that you voiced that, because I think that we don't say that out loud enough, even though that may be deeply how we feel and how we journey. So I would love for you to talk about your transition. Obviously, you're doing a lot of this work around stillbirth awareness, and just the transition from you being a mom and a patient advocate to like really being the therapist. That's a different hat that you put on your head. But I also, what I love about what you do is that it allows you to come from a place of empathy and compassion, because you've experienced it before. So I would love for you to talk about how you made that transition in your work, because you're still doing both, but obviously it's definitely a part of what you do every day.
Right. Oh, thank you. Well, so I think it started out actually with the pageantry and making a decision to even have stillbirth awareness as my platform. I think there was not a sense of shame, but a sense of apprehension, because you're like, oh, who wants to hear about stillbirth and all this stuff? So a lot of it used to be about education and literacy in Haiti. And then one day I decided, I was like, no, like if I don't talk about it, I don't hear it a lot in pageantry. So I started to have stillbirth awareness as my platform. And my heart has always been, my desire has always been to create a safe space for women who've had perinatal loss, like a therapeutic kind of place, center. It's always been there. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'll run the center. And I'm like, I don't have the credentials to kind of run the center. What am I going to do? So I started to think about it a lot. And like I said, I was a teacher for over 20 years. And but wasn't really happy. I love speaking. I loved coaching. That I knew. I love being a literacy coach. I love helping and supporting teachers. But I was just like, don't love teaching in this capacity. I'm always a teacher. So when the opportunity came up during COVID, whether I was going to stay or not, I made the decision to leave because I was like, okay, my talents lie elsewhere. And my heart is for women who've had loss. Why? Because I had nothing when I needed it. I had no one to talk to, no one to support me, no one to give me therapy. It's just me, myself, and I. And I said, I want to be for other women what I never had. So I already had a counseling degree, and I went back to school to become a mental health counselor. And I told, the executive director, I said, this is my heart. I want to give back to women who have had perinatal loss. And she was like, listen, let's do it. And so I had my first group this year, May. And it was such an amazing space because it was multicultural. It wasn't just one, race of women. It was just multi-racial. And it was just like to be in a space, one, that the therapist totally can relate. I may not understand everything, right? Because we all have our different experiences, but I can relate. So when someone says, I just want someone to say my baby's name, I get that. Like, I understand that. Or I want someone to remember the anniversary of my baby's passing. I get that. And so it was such a space of just uplifting and just, it was so amazing and heartbreaking at the same time. I just knew that this is where I need to be. This is where I need to be. So it's a recent transition. So I can't say I've been doing it for years, but everything that I've gone through up to that point has led me to this point, which I'm full of gratitude for. And I have so many desires and dreams to see more happen. I still want to build my center and just have women who have had a loss can come in and just be, right? Because sometimes you may relate, you had a loss, people come visit you. I know it's a cultural thing, and people come visit you and you can't be, right? Because first you got to tell a story, then they don't like to see you sad. They want you to be okay, but you're not okay. You just want to sit, you just want to not speak, you just want to cry, you just want to. And it's just so hard to do that around family and friends, certain family and friends. So I just want a place where women can come and just be whatever it is that they want.
Absolutely love that. Love. And love the transition. I think that is where a lot of people are. A lot of people have found themselves during the pandemic or are still thinking about what's that next thing that they want to do. That's a passion thing for them that aligns with their purpose and a lot of the things that they've been doing and advocating for. So I love that you're doing that. I would love for you to talk a little about your work with Push Pregnancy as well, and how, some of the programs and things that you all are doing in the year.
Yes. So Push for Empowered Pregnancy started last year. Actually, it's going to be 2 years. One of the reasons why we even was created is because we were a part of another organization that was not about equity, right? They want to really focus on women of color and their loss and everything that was going on in that is the honest truth of Black maternal health and what's happening with that. And we felt like there was about 8 of us who felt like that was important because that's what's happening. That's what the reality is. Black mothers are dying, Black babies are dying, and we need to be really spotlighting and highlighting and doing something about it. So we broke off and we created Push for Empowered Pregnancy. And so our goal is to end preventable stillbirths, right? For me, we found out the reason why our son passed away is because he had a velamentous cord insertion. So a lot of the reasons is people have issues with their placentas. So we're wanting for the government to put legislation in place for stillbirth so that we can collect data. The problem with stillbirth awareness is that you don't know why it's happening. There's so many reasons. There's so many different reasons, but there's no database, nothing where we can say, okay, 50% is this, 12% is this, 10% is this, right? It's just like they're all lumped in together. Stillbirth is stillbirth. No, it's not. There are differences, right? There are different reasons, and we have to be able to know the whys. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, and that's why we're backing up this act that's about to be on the Senate floor, a Shine for Autumn Act, and which would require that hospitals keep copious data of why, like when stillbirths are happening, why it's happening. So that's the major thing for us. The other thing is we just created a rainbow clinic. And what a rainbow clinic is a space where women who, after they've had perinatal loss, it's hard to find a doctor that's very empathetic, can understand that you're nervous because you had a previous loss. And some of us can't find that. So we created something that was already happening in Europe. Europe is way ahead of us in always everything medicine. And so they already had a rainbow clinic in Europe. So we decided that we were going to replicate that in America. So we created last year a rainbow clinic, a space where women can come in and get extra focus, extra care, extra whatever you need to be supportive so that you feel safe, right? Safe, or at least heard and supported through your rainbow baby, right? And it's something that we funded ourselves, which is amazing feat. But we just funded it for the second year. We're going to fund it one more year. And we're just so happy to be able to have that kind of space for women. Like I said, now I left my former OB because I thought she was a bit crass. And I just wanted nothing to do with her, or the midwife. So, but I was lucky enough that my OB was just amazing, but not everybody has that. And so that's why we felt it was important to create the Rainbow Clinic. So reducing preventable stillbirth, creating a space that women can go to in their rainbow pregnancies and feel safe and feel supported, and get all the tests that they feel that they need to feel at ease. You're never going to feel 100%, but at least you feel at ease while you're during that pregnancy.
Absolutely love it. So I would love for you to leave our listeners with some encouraging words as they continue to navigate their journey in this new year.
Yes. Well, I think if you've had a recent loss, I want to say my heartfelt condolences to those, and I'm sure there are sadly many this year, because the data shows us 24,000 a year of loss. So my condolences to those who have had a loss, but also to know, thank goodness, there's a lot of support out there. A lot of and I just thank you, Erica, for creating such a space for women of color, because that's the other thing is you may find a loss group, but you may not see people who look like you. So that's very important to have that kind of a space. So, but knowing that there's so many organizations out there that's ready to support you, ready to help you to navigate through your grief. Grief is not linear. You may be okay one day and not okay the next day, and that's okay. But know that you can and you will get through it. It's a must. It's a must. And when you're ready, channel that grief, channel that anger, channel it into something that is that that will change the world, that can change the world. And we know that most people who create amazing things is through traumatic experiences, unfortunately, a lot of the times. Sometimes it'd be great if most things were not created through trauma, but through trauma, a lot of great things have been created. And so I encourage women to just to not feel like they have to sit in their grief, but to know that they can create something amazing out of it. Just take it one day at a time. Just take it one day at a time.
I absolutely love that. So where can we connect with you and all the work that you're doing after this episode?
Okay, well, on Instagram, I'm Marjorie Vail, MarjorieVail. I also have besides being a trauma therapist, I work for Global Trauma Research, but I'm also a coach. I love to coach women through their own personal journey to greatness. I have a business called Enmerak LLC, ENMERAK LLC, and that is where I do my coaching business and my aesthetic business. It is beauty from the inside out. So those are the two spaces that people can find me. And then Push for Empowered Pregnancy for anyone who looking for resources, looking to join the fight. That's Push Pregnancy. That's also on IG at Push Pregnancy as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.